Hey everybody, for World College Poker, I'm Alec Rome, and today joining me, multi-bracelet winner. I think he's won every tournament on the planet, potentially, and still has more that he's hunting for. It's Chance Kornuth. Chance, welcome to World College Poker, and thanks for talking with me today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Congratulations on the new baby, by the way, and I'm sure that is a both exciting and awesome and frightful and stressful feeling in the middle of everything. Um, what do you,
Yeah, I think you named most of the emotions.
yeah, everything, all of the rainbow of emotions. What's something that maybe when we think about like balancing a poker career and a family, like what are some things that maybe people don't think about, and maybe that you didn't even realize until now?
Um, well, it's kind of tricky. I used to just grind tournaments, or at least like not used to, but in the past few years, like purely grind tournaments. And now I realize that like if my daughter's about to walk or like crawling for the first time, I don't want to miss that because I'm locked in, $10,000, $20,000 in tournaments. So, like it just seems like way smarter for me to like grind cash right now and work on my company. And
Hmm.
that way, like if time to come look, like I don't lose EV by doing that. So I think that's the current plan at least. Like when I first started grinding poker with a friend, I didn't have a kid, and it was just like, it didn't matter. Like I would sleep with my laptop next to me while waiting for heads up action, and with the volume all the way up. And when it beeped, I would play. Especially after Black Friday when I was trying to rebuild a roll. And
Right.
so now it's just a whole different animal for sure.
Obviously, and I guess I'm not even sure. Is this the first interview that you've done since the end of the Galfond challenge?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I'm honored to be the first interview since then, and that's nuts. I'm very happy about that because there's a lot of things that I'm curious about. And I guess to start off, obviously, like it's tough for I think everybody to talk about um, losses and just moments where things didn't go the way you wanted it to go. But I think there's a lot of lessons that come from that too. And down 750,000 with 10,000 hands left. What made you decide, you know what, I'm cutting my losses. I'm done. I don't want to continue even with that amount of volume left.
Of a couple of factors. I think the simple factor is that I sold a package based on $1 million to 750 and 250 for the side bet.
Mhm.
But I did have the ability to extend that if I wanted to. However, with 1,000 or I'm sorry, 10,000 hands left, I did think that it was somewhat unlikely that would be able to mount a comeback, and not to mention that I really hadn't had a six-figure win in quite some time. Like I think in the first maybe 10 to 15,000 hands, probably 10,000 hands, there was a very good chance that I had a significant edge, and I was feeling incredibly confident. That I don't know if it was somewhere I was unbalanced or if we just figured out some tendency better, or a combination of all those factors, that I just didn't really feel like I had an edge anymore.
And that's fair, and that's it must be one of those things where did you like you said, did you even know when it was happening that you lost it? Did you have a moment where you're like, "Oh, I feel like I'm off now. I was on and now I'm off."
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like call it like an on and off, if you will, but there was definitely spots where like he was calling certain bluffs that he was folding versus, and he was folding in certain value bets that he was calling against before. And so things definitely did feel like they changed.
Uh, what do you think was something that playing in this challenge has taught you that you're going to take into the future, into the rest of your poker career?
I mean, a lot of stuff from the mental aspects to what it takes to play your A game to, not going on tilt, the PLO core fundamentals that I improved so drastically upon. And,
Hmm.
I've actually played two sessions, one yesterday, one today since I've come back. And like, it's so crazy like playing these other players in PLO. Like it really is just, it feels so much easier. It's like, oh, this board, I bet this size, this hand's a check, this hand's a check raise. And it's just like situations, I'd say that I'd have to use a little bit more logic to get to the right answer. But now it was just like look at a situation and I felt like I knew the right answer immediately. So I do plan on taking this as a learning experience and making all that back and more in the next year or so.
And you got plenty of admiration from your opponent, and now it feels like you're swinging a baseball bat with a weight on it. All of a sudden you take the weight off, and oh my gosh, this bat is twice as light as it was before, and then start swinging at some people.
It's really funny you use that analogy because I was talking to a very good friend of mine yesterday, and he's like, "Yeah, it's like playing with a wooden bat, and now you're playing with an aluminum bat." So literally the exact same analogy that you just used.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah, no, I mean, it's there's one article that I saw. I think you did it with Card Player, where you talked about taking risks with your bankroll and taking higher shots. Do you think that this challenge was one of those risks for you, those higher shots that you may have recommended before?
No, like I sold action, like I said. So this is something that I knew was going to be a low edge situation, and I biased to take a large bankroll shot with a low edge spot. Mm-hmm. And so it was something that I approached very conservatively with my bankroll.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, it's always interesting because I feel like the average person would look at that sum of money nearly being two houses and think that ends up being a huge risk spot. But in reality, for a lot of the world's best and how much we trade action nowadays, I mean, it can reduce your fear of the situation a lot more. And I imagine that had to happen in order for you to play well. Like I would be afraid if I was playing all of my action.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I was risking an amount where, like, if I did lose 200K in a day, that I wouldn't be on like emotional tilt. I wanted to make sure that I could lose the expected max loss in one session or even a week, and I would still be able to do my best to play my A game moving forward. Like I thought I owed it to myself and investors if I'm partaking in this large of an endeavor to make sure that I'm throughout.
Now, we're talking about one loss, and we look behind you, and I see Poker Stars trophies, and I know there's an Aussie Millions up there, and lots of successes. Let's talk about the story and the journey to getting all those things behind you. What was the story of how you found poker, and what do you think was your flashpoint moment of this is a game, or even just a side income to this is going to be my career?
I was architectural engineering in college and never really had an affinity for it, and just didn't know what else I wanted to do. And I was playing poker in maybe sophomore or junior year, but freshman year in the doors, a grocery game where you'd go and make a couple $100, and then in junior and senior year, I really started to take it more seriously. And I was really drawn to the fact that it, almost like self-promotion with bankroll management. It's like, okay, it's like I had $1,000 and now I have $2,000. I can play a little bit higher stakes and et cetera, et cetera. And super drawn to the fact that I could be my own boss. And if I wanted to work hard and improve and move up in stakes, I was able to. And if things didn't go your way, you could effectively demote yourself and move down. And that was a very attractive factor for me.
Was there anybody that may have kind of swayed you along the way to be like, Chance, you really should follow this. You do have the ability to do something like this, to do this professionally?
My dad was always supportive, and my mom was always like, finish college.
Yeah.
But neither of them were actually really the one that helped push me over the edge. There was a professor in college that was actually a math professor, which was by far and away my greatest strength. I was talking to him actually one day, and I was like, hey, so I'm doing pretty well at this poker thing. I'm thinking about dropping out of college and moving to Vegas and really giving it a shot. Yeah, I told him how much money I was making and just won a tournament for 22 grand or something on Poker Stars. And I was thinking about doing it, and he was like, Chance, why are you still here? This is coming from a professor at a college. And for him to basically, he's like, well, if you fail, who cares? Just come back and finish your semester of college, and you can go and do this architectural engineering path, which I had no desire to do anyway. And so it really was just like, if this professor thinks that like I should take this shot, and he's like, wait, you have a chance to make a living, a very good living at something that you love, that you're talented and gifted at. Um, and it was just, he phrased it in a way that was such a no-brainer, that really did put on for me.
Did you ever text him after a big win? You're like, man, you were right. You were right, man.
No, I've actually thought about it like multiple times, but I just never have gotten around to it. I think I probably should one day. That's it.
Well, there we go. I mean, you got some credit here at least. But no, that's cool. I mean, that's you always. I feel like too in the game, just because of the stigma around it, and jumping into, as a young person, jumping into a game full of variants that, like, everybody's like, what are you doing? Like, you're in college, just get the degree. Like, get the degree. But it's interesting
Yeah.
that the math teacher was willing to give you the vote of confidence and tell you to get out of here, to leave.
Even that get the degree mentality like really doesn't hold true. So I started college in 2004, and in my major, like 99% of kids for the last 10 years had gotten job placements.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I didn't graduate, but my friends graduated, it was like 17%. Getting a degree really doesn't guarantee success. And I do think, like, don't get me wrong, like my daughter will be highly encouraged to go to college.
Yeah.
I think that in general, it's not like not going to college is required to be successful without going to college. But I do think that that is a good path for some people.
And the channel that we're on is World College Poker, and it is trying to find ways to maybe cultivate the game within colleges and within youth, so that if people wanted to make that jump, not to say we're encouraging anybody to just jump right now and go into the game, but it gives people that option and introduces a lot of people worldwide to a game that, obviously, I'm sure I could speak for you and I, that has brought us both lots of great things. That architectural engineering thing, that's a long ways away. That's in the rear view mirror, about 1,000 miles back for you.
And I still want to go back and get a degree, but it definitely wouldn't be in that. I have no interest whatsoever.
That's nice. So, let's talk about that too, because I'm uh, always interested in thinking about and talking to people about how do youth grow this game, and how does this game go into the next 5, 10, 20 years. What do you think is, like, how do you think young people play into the equation of the poker industry?
I think that they're definitely relevant. I mean, for people, like, new people need to come into the game lower stakes and even higher stakes to be successful, and for the ecosystem need to evolve and grow.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that it's relevant. However, I don't know if there are as many young people coming into it as there used to be.
And why do you think that is?
Than I would. Just because I guess you don't really hear about the young people climbing their way to the top as much anymore.
Do you
Like, it's just considerably, like, you do hear of them,
mm-hmm.
but it's just much less common.
Would you what would be something that maybe you would change about how we present the game? What maybe like something institutionally, or what would be something you would change to try and bring young people into the game?
Well, I think, like, back in the day, you could grind up through the lower stakes because the edges were so much bigger, regardless of the rake to big blind ratio. However, now, because of that ratio being much higher than it used to be, I think it just makes it a lot less common and more difficult for people to move up through the stakes.
And probably the lack of games too, I would imagine. I mean, the lack of, we're in the middle of a pandemic too, and we're all, stuck at home sometimes, with the occasional, trip out to with home games. But yeah, I mean, the lack of games certainly doesn't help either.
Yeah, for sure.
So we talked about already somebody that encouraged you into to making the jump, but we all need mentors along the way of some kind. Who was or is your mentor in the game?
When I first moved to Vegas, actually, I met Ben Lamb at a poker table, and he did something at the table that, like, he folded a hand. We were like seven handed, and he was under the gun with like ace ten, and he was raised folding every hand. And under the gun, he like folds in a way that like the cards kind of hit and flip over.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dealer had to flip them over, and it was ace ten, and like we were kind of like chatting and having a little fun. We were sitting right next to each other, and I was like a little bit perplexed, and I thought about it for a couple seconds, and I was like, "You did that on purpose." And he goes, "I'm Ben. We need to be friends." And with him like 2 weeks later, and I had already been playing PLO, and I actually got to learn so much more from him because he like was playing a game, and I actually like a heads up PLO game, and I actually got to watch him and buy 30% in a game that he was beating. So I was basically getting paid to get better at PLO at the time, and that was probably 2009 or eight. I think it was 2008. You know, definitely a mentoring experience, if you will. But I'm sure we helped each other in a bunch of different ways, and we were both into live tells and both into PLO. So it was a very good combination. We lived together for a couple of years, and then about 2 years ago, I bought a house that's 7 houses or 8 houses away from him now.
That's crazy. That's crazy. One hand gets
Yes,
flipped over, and
still very good friends.
and maybe on purpose, a little bit of encouraged fate in a way. PLO is still kind of a growing game. A lot of people get introduced to No Limit Hold'em, No Limit Hold'em. Oh my God, we hear about it all the time. But PLO's budding in a way. What do you think is sometimes a barrier for people not choosing to move over to PLO or try the game?
I think part of it's fear, part of it's a lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of variance, and so people, if they're having trouble handling the variance of No Limit, they might be deterred. Seeing people just stack off sometimes, not knowing what the hands are, maybe that happened to them, and now they're deterred. It could be a variety of things.
And I mean, if we think multi-table tournaments are a variance fest, and then you add PLO to it, that's even crazier. But you have won PLO tournaments before. What do you think are some major strategies for PLO tournaments that maybe the introductory person just does not consider when they step to the table?
That you can't rebuy.
Yeah.
There's like, it seems so like obvious to say, but there's so many situations where it's like, okay, people just really do kind of go, they have 4 cards and they have good equity, and it's time to get it all in or whatever. But like, you really do have to find ways to, instead of just 3-bet shoving pre-flop with a short stack, you call and stop and go, or you have a hand with 20 big blinds that becomes a limp call as opposed to a raise call, and just finding ways to get more fold equity. I think that's a thing that most people don't realize. They're just like, they'll just raise call with 12 big blinds, and they're just effectively all in, and there's no more skill left. But if they would have limp called, there's a chance the guy would have check folded, or there's a chance that they would have been able to make a good decision on the flop, which in turn reduces variance and increases the frequency in which they're still in the tournament.
Right. I mean, that's kind of an interesting sort of like counterintuitive, because there's different people that will limp a lot from early position in No Limit Hold'em, and then we think, oh my God, what are you doing, sort of deal. But with PLO, because of the extra variance, like you're saying, that sometimes you can't just raise 3, have somebody pot you, and you're like stuck where you just have to call it away.
In No Limit, it's like a spot where someone opens and you jam 12 big blinds, you have fold equity. But if someone opens to 2.5, 3 big blinds in PLO, and you're jamming 12 big blinds or potting it, you don't have fold equity. Like, I mean, maybe you do in some rare instances, but like in general, that it might be better to just call with that hand and shove the flop when you have like a weak hand that's check the bottom of your range, check the top of your range, and shove the middle.
Right.
and it just allows you to do a little bit more with a short step.
What would you say is a piece of advice that you wish that you had learned earlier about the game?
Mm, how much your side cards matter. Something I
Mm-hmm.
really like learned during the Galfond challenge is like you could have a hand that, on a flop with two hearts, your exact holding without a heart would be a check, and your exact holding with a heart would be a bet. Just something that I hadn't really thought of as much in the past. Sense like having a heart one um, will decrease the frequency in which hearts come. Queen 40 is two hearts, and you have a queen and side cards with a heart. Well, now your side card that has a heart in it is an extra clean out, and the heart in your hand decreases the frequency in which your opponent has a continuing range. So it's like a double-edged sword where both qualities are positive.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're always, because of PLO being so much about blockers and like you having almost double the information in your hand. In a limited information game, you have to know how to use that in a way. Use that limited but increased information to help yourself instead of just these are the only two cards that kind of hit the flop. Let me just kick these. Let me just put these two down and let me look at these two. In a
Yeah,
way, you got to play all four, right? I mean, would that be a good fundamental for people to just like you want to play all four cards? Like you
yeah,
should
and
aim
just
to
know that
play all four.
when you're c betting the bottom or the middle of your range, um, like if you have a 10 of hearts and the board's king 8 deuce with two hearts, like now the person can't have ace 10 of hearts, they can't have jack 10 of hearts, queen 10 of hearts. Like it reduces the combos considerably more drastically than would be expected. Not to mention if on the king 8 deuce two hearts board you have, the king jack 10 9, all of a sudden you have an extra 10 you can hit for top two pair. And it's just, very counter, like it makes total sense when you hear it. But it's not necessarily something that people decode on their own.
You said earlier, and you mentioned in talking about with Ben Lamb about Plo and live tells, and it was one of the things that I noticed too of like, okay, he's kind of like people maybe consider you to be the flag bearer in a way, and I don't know if you consider that yourself, but I feel like there's a split in a way where there's some people that play the game a lot. They're like, live tells, it doesn't really matter. And then when I have people in my life that are completely new to the game and they watch the movies and they hear about poker, they're like, oh, poker face, poker tells. So clear the air for us. What are both sides wrong about or right about? What do we need to know?
Yeah, so if you're playing online poker, there's X number of elements of information. When you're playing live poker, there's all of the same elements, except for there's the additional element of being able to look at each other in the game. But to discount that element of information is at a certain level where some people are incredibly good at just being monotonous and not, doing the same thing every time. Then there's a lot of information to be had. I've studied different aspects of live tells, and a lot of it was trial and error. A lot of it was studying materials, and that's one of the reasons that I've got so honed at it is because I was probably over focusing on it for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm. Versus it's almost like like an extra piece that if you're 50-50 or you're a little stuck on a decision, that maybe that little extra piece helps you figure out the puzzle. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, we're not playing, like we said, we're not playing live as much due to the pandemic. Have you attempted to pick up or pay attention more to compensate for online tells, timing tells, or do you feel like that's just sort of like, well, that's kind of missing, and I think I have to go back to just focusing on optimal play?
I was playing Phil for the last 4 or 5 months, I've been extremely focused on not focusing on the tells.
Hmm.
But timing tells is definitely a real thing. Timing tells, bet sizing tells, but that actually exists in live and online. So I'm happy you brought it up. It's definitely something to consider.
Um, if we're talking to anybody that any young person like yourself that is trying to build a bankroll, that's wants to get serious about the game, that we've had players compete in tournaments in the last month or two, what is your golden ticket piece of advice? Like, this I would take this piece of information all the way to the bank and carry it with you.
Play against people that are worse than you.
Find
I
bad
mean, game
games.
selection is yeah, game selection is so important.
That's funny. What do you think? Do you think people
Being
kind
really
of,
important too,
yeah? Do you think
and like constantly improving.
people kind of like throw the game selection part to the side in a way? Like it doesn't even become a consideration. They just pick whatever is available to them.
Often, yeah. But it's like if there's 4 games and like like in the lobby and you're in one and you realize that people are folding the big blind or there's no one really like splashing around, like you can look at the other tables and see if there is anyone doing those things. Not to mention like a lot of the tables have like a little stat on them that say like percentage of players to flop or average pot size. If yours is the lowest, you should probably change games.
Uh, are there things, or what are some things that you see still in higher stakes that people might be surprised that is still a thing in higher stakes?
I mean, I play in some games where like the SPRs, the stack to pot ratios too. There's like 10K in the middle. They have 20K stacks, and the guy just blasts it off with aces on King Queen 9. Like you still see some stuff. I'm not gonna lie.
No, it's funny, and it's interesting too because the scoreboard in poker is how much you have in front of you, how much money there is, and so there might be a correlation between like, oh, well, somebody's playing 100, 200, they must be better than me. When in reality, that can be true. Maybe that trends that way, but not
Yeah.
always. Maybe.
Also, like as you move up in stakes, and what you said is absolutely true. But just something that it reminded me of is as you move up in stakes, different skills are required to win at each level. Like slightly, it's some of the lower stakes. It's just all about playing tight and waiting for the better hand. Some of the next stakes, like okay, well they see bet too much, so you got to defend the big blind and check raise more with like more bluffs, or and so just make sure that like if you are trying to move up through stakes, that you're trying to find like the nuances that do change as you move up.
Paying attention. I feel like that's a huge thing too. That some people
Yeah,
that are like that, you know, play on their phones or eat a sandwich at the table maybe or something like that. That aren't paying attention to everything around them or have the headphones on like I do when they play. That you pull that little extra 0.5% like you do when you're paying attention to people physically, paying attention to their bet linings. That drives you to success. Would you say that your focus on the details propelled you to winning the money that you have, the trophies that you had behind you? Is that a factor?
yeah. I mean, oftentimes people ask me a question and they'll be like, "So this guy did that. Like this guy shoved the river and did this." I'm like, I mean, you're asking me this question because you're filing a big pot with the guy and you're focused because he's about to shove into you on the river. But it's like I would have been looking at that guy for 4 hours and I would know the answer immediately. But it's like, yeah, I can tell you that okay, he did this. It's probably 75% that he was weak. But it's like if you would have paid attention, or maybe 60% that he's weak. But if you would have paid attention, the information could have been 90% or 100% on some people. And so like you can know all the information and all the stuff that I've studied, but the most important thing that I have learned about live tells is the importance of baselining your opponents. I'm not gonna like spend learn. It's like say you folded under the gun and then the button raises and the big blind calls. Well, and then there's like something that happens, the way he checks, the way they bet, the way he check raises, stuff like that. But if you would have just folded under the gun and looked at your phone, you would have missed that. And you would have missed that tell on the big blind, the guy that's on your immediate right, that had you actually have been able to like exploit that player every time he raises pre-flop. And so it's like paying attention is like the number one thing to learning live tells. And don't get me wrong, you do have to know what you're looking for, but it's like there's certain times where Foxen and I will be like, well, this guy just didn't have it. And it's like, you can't even always articulate why. It's like, but I know that I've been staring at the guy for 4 hours and he's been weak, and then all of a sudden he looks different. Strong as B is to weak. Like he's looked weak, and I don't know what's different, but something's different. He just has to be strong.
And do you like, because that's an
Power
interesting.
productive.
Yeah, like it's almost unconscious. Like you get to a point where, like you just said there, and there's a lot of psychology and studies behind a concept called like thin slicing or something like that, where decisions and people have just trained so much, like yourself, and hours and hours and hours, to the point where the brain you can't even use language to say why something, but you just do.
Thin slicing is like a good version. Blink by Malcolm Gladwell is one. And it's like there's just certain things where you just can tell. Like I can't always tell you why, but I just know that guy doesn't have it. And like, I have, been coaching for a while now, and so my ability to articulate why someone's weak or strong is good. But there's definitely still times where I'm just like, no, he doesn't have it. But it's because I've been staring at him for 4 hours and popped him not in, and actually like doing my absolute best to pay attention. And then it's this time where it pays off.
And that's a good segue. You're wearing the shirt of the coaching company you founded, obviously repping the brand. I love it. Let's talk about that. Why did you get into coaching? Why did you add that to your portfolio of your life in a way?
I had a big year in tournaments, and just kind of looking for, to start something that was a little less variance, to be more at home, more of a family man. Mm-hmm. And I saw an opportunity to help people follow their dreams in poker.
And you obviously run with Alex Fox and all that, but is there somebody that you've coached along the way that is not a household name, but that you think of like, that's my golden child, like that is like, I'm so happy, like they're my success story that maybe we haven't heard about yet, that you think of?
As far as haven't heard about yet, I think that like it would only hurt their EV to
right.
To
yes,
say.
You don't have to say. I was gonna say, you can keep
there
that.
Are a couple guys, but like if I say the name and then someone sees them, they'll be like, "Oh, I know not. I know I want to like trick him or like." So I don't want to take away from their EV and possibility of being the next superstar.
But what would you say is a characteristic that they had that propelled them to success?
Focus and work ethic.
Is
the ability to pay attention and being able to work when they're not playing as well. Like they work hard. And like, it's so important to work on your game. And there's so many ways to do it. Like I think the biggest problem with training today is like, say you're watching videos on one of my competitor sites and you're like, oh, I want to watch this 3-betting video, but all you do is 3-bet and you're pretty good at it. Like video topic you need to get better at. And so like you're sifting through these countless hours of videos, but unless you're incredibly self-aware, and to be honest, I don't think most poker players are, myself included, all of us sometimes, you're not going to know where you need to improve. And that's actually why Chip Leader Coaching, myself and Alex Fox, and we partnered with an artificial intelligence company called Socrates. And we're coming out with a product in the next 6 to 8 weeks that we've spent dollars on, thousands of hours, and it's going to be called Chip Leader AI. And it's going to be an artificial intelligence platform where Foxen and I went through and chose hand histories out of our own database, explanations and questions in this giant topic map. And as you go through the platform, the AI engine actually says, you need to work on this. And it feeds you questions from the areas that you're weak in. It'll be like the next way to learn poker. I think it's going to be amazing.
That's awesome. That sounds really really cool. And that was one thing too that I was going to bring up that I hadn't mentioned was that technology. How did you decide like we're going to create a neural network for poker? We're going to create some sort of training
It's
neural
actually kind
network.
of funny. I was at a neighbor's Chinese New Year's party a couple years back, and that's how long we've been working on this. And he's like, "Oh, what do you do?" Blah blah blah. I play poker on a coaching site. I'm like, "What do you do?" And he goes, "Well, we actually own a like an artificial intelligence platform that teaches childhood education, and the platform can be programmed to teach anything." And I
Huh.
think you and I can do something. And about 6 months later, we put the deposit down on the platform and built it, and we're actually in beta testing now. So we're really excited for it to come out.
That's
Chip
crazy.
Leader, what's the website now? Is it Chip Leader? We just got a new one. If you go on clcpoker.com, you can like check out a little bit of more information about it. You can put your email address to be a beta tester, just get notified when it becomes available to the public. So if you guys want to learn more about that, don't hesitate to go to clcpoker.com.
I might have to do that. Beta test clcpoker.com. That's awesome. That's then and it's I feel like there's a do you think that maybe over the last 20 years like the image of poker is like transitioning from the casino rooms with flashy sort of personalities to like the brains and the Harvard minds and the computer scientists and the nerds, I guess. We use that term so freely. But do you think that that's where poker's going? A little bit more mental?
Um, yes and no. I think that's one of the biggest problems with my generation playing poker is they don't realize like poker grew because of the people that Negreanu and Helmuth and Mattisau and like the game grew because they were fun to watch. They were fun to play with. And it's like, keep in mind, so businessmen come to Vegas or play online. They know they're losing money, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you sit there like all bundled up in a hoodie with headphones and never talk to them and you're not personable, they're not going to have fun. They're not going to come back. And so, like, yeah, I stare at you when I'm in a hand. And honestly, like in a cash game in Vegas, I wouldn't even do that. But in tournaments, people already bought in.
Yeah.
But like, I think it's so important to like when you're not in the hand. Hey, where are you from? Like, what do you do? Like, be personable. Have fun with them. Like, have fun. And if you can tell they don't want to talk to you, that's fine. But like, just don't kind of sit there and time and like people who are on their iPad and playing one game and the poker table, like God, I just want to slow roll the shit out of them. Like it's just so bad for the game. Like get out of here. No one wants you. You're making money, but like who cares? Like they don't realize how short sighted it is to do that. It's like yeah, you might have a slightly better hourly now, but it's like there's plenty of times where I hurt my hourly for the longevity of being able to play. Games are private. I never get invited. I'm like, yeah, because you're fucking terrible to play with. Like, no one wants to spend time with you. It's like, have fun, like, joke around a little bit, show a bluff, show a value hand. Like, made a good fold. Let them feel bad they made a bad fold. Like, people just, it's so important to make sure that people that are there recreationally are having fun because that's what they're there to do. And that's something I think that a lot of my generation of poker players
That's interesting. I mean, I feel that way a little bit too because I grew up and got interested in the game because of watching the main event and just seeing the different personalities and knowing the names of people and finding them to be interesting and emotive. And there's been a transition that it's cool because we're in it, like we are in it, so we can still watch poker where everybody's kind of quiet and
Yeah,
stoic
like
and
I still watch and even I don't watch sometimes. And it's like I could watch any poker content anytime. And there's certain things that like I wouldn't even want to watch because the poker players that are playing are just so boring.
stale. Yeah, no, I get that. It gets it's shifted almost because like I nowadays it feels like we're shifting like poker and chess are like neighbors in a way. I feel like that we're
Yeah,
like right there, because chess, we've always felt is be like, that's the game where people are like quiet the whole time and they just stare at the board and you're like, what are they doing? What is any of
yeah,
this? Like, why would you stare at a board for 3 hours? Versus like poker, everybody screws around, plays poker, and is okay with losing because they're having fun. And
yeah.
like you're saying, maybe there's the shift in attitude of we're going the wrong way. In that way, we got to keep cultivating that in the game.
Yeah, and the first book I actually read on poker had to do with like the poker psychology, and there was like four main reasons that people play poker. And obviously, you could be a balance of four, and your dot would be right in the middle, or you could be 100% of like 100% money, 100% fun. And I forgot what the other two were, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so immediately I kind of saw that like, why do I want to play? Well, I think it's fun. I like money, so I immediately knew that I was somewhere in the middle. It's so important to make sure that everyone's having fun.
No, that's
And
completely.
even for your own well-being, you're gonna sit there for 12 hours, like try to have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna sit and watch yourself lose money for a little bit, you might as well enjoy yourself because there's no point to it. Then that's just some sort of weird masochism, you know. I don't know why you would do that, but no, that's true. And that's in a way like my involvement with World College Poker. And oh, Craig says hi, by the way. Craig wanted me to tell you
Hey, Craig.
hello. And just our involvement was because of the passion. It all comes back to it. I don't always win at the game, but goddamn, I love it. It's fun. I enjoy the
Yeah,
community, and maybe there's less community building and more pilfering of whatever community money there might be around.
yeah, definitely.
Do you feel or like what's a community around poker? Like do you think that your training site, do you feel proud to have built a community around poker? Do you feel like that's a positive community that you've left and that you can leave as a legacy in the game?
Yes and no. Like one of the biggest issues I had with the way it was set up before, with like all the one-on-one and like you have to be accepted, et cetera, was it did kind of say no to people, which we didn't want to do. And one of the greatest aspects of upcoming chip leader AI is the fact that we're going to have a community that you can choose to join, and you can post hands, and myself or Foxen or some of our other coaches will respond, and it will be a much more of a community. And so, short answer, no, not yet, but in the future, it will. It definitely is headed in that direction.
No, that's awesome. It's been a pleasure. I want to make sure before we go, is there anything else that you want to talk about, or just to remind us of what we can do to reach out to you, to reach out to CLC Poker? What do you have left that you want to get out?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be a part of any of my thoughts from the Galfond challenge, I have a bunch of notes and things that I want to share from my experience. You can go and also put your email address in on CLC Poker. Another thing that Fox and I have been working on that should be released in about 3 months is a product called the Closer, which will be kind of an all-encompassing thing you want to learn about closing and winning tournaments. Um, but it just kind of depends. Do you want something that you can just go look at, which that's what that will be. It will have reviews of his five diamond type final tables, ICM fundamentals, and just like every single aspect of poker tournaments we can think to include. And then the chip leader AI will be an engine that walks you through a similar set of knowledge.
I mean, what more could you want, folks? CLCpoker.com. Community, AI, technology, the best in the world. So I'm sold. You got me sold, man. Chance Kornuth.
Come join us.
I will. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate the time. It's been a pleasure talking with you.